So Vue versus Astro, Nuxt versus Astro, what should you do? So many people are talking about Astro right now. I thought I would give it a spin, compare it to using Vue.js and Nuxt, and why you may want to use this on your next project. I'm gonna give you a primer on how to use it, and I'll tell you if it's worth going for. All right, so here is the Astro website at astro.build, and Astro 3 just came out, which is really neat. The H1 tag is the web framework that scales with you. Astro builds fast content sites, powerful web applications, dynamic server APIs, and everything in between. It's good to remember the history behind Astro, that Astro really came out of the idea of creating these fast content sites. It has this markdown integration into it. So it's almost, if you're coming with the Vue mindset, it's almost like adding VPress. At this point, it's way beyond that. You can create basically any sort of website you want because it supports not just static site generated or SSG, but also has server-side rendering. You can do API routes. It kind of has some similarities to Nuxt in a few ways and Next, which we'll talk about. So it has this really cool islands architecture that they're calling it, where the islands, you can have different parts of your apps. Maybe some parts of your app are statically generated and other parts are running JavaScript, and it's designed for your favorite UI library. Really what I'm going to look at today, we're going to jump into some code. We're going to create a brand new application. We're going to take a look at how you can add a Vue component to an Astro app. But we're also going to look at just like the basics of Astro. I think this is what's getting a lot of people excited, is like if you are coming from Vue or React or Svelte, even Tailwind, you can even easily add in Tailwind and other things. This is a really good way to get started. So let's jump into the code. Make sure you stay all the way to the end. There's some few surprises I think you'll find surprising, especially if you're coming from Vue. Let's take a look. So we are going to create a brand new Astro application. To start, we can follow the guides in the astro.build website. We're going to use Node, but you can use your favorite package manager. One thing to notice too, I'm using Node 18. Make sure you have Node 18 or higher. I'm also using Node version manager there. So I'm gonna do npm create. It's gonna be Astro at latest. And then it's gonna ask me a few questions. This is Houston. This is the Astro mascot. It's kind of very funny. So I'm gonna do Astro app view is the name of the app. I'm gonna include the sample file so we can kind of take a look at them. It's going to build the template. We're gonna install the dependencies, which will just take a moment. Now it's going to ask us if we want to use TypeScript. So I'm gonna hit yes here. I'm a big TypeScript fan. If you're not, leave a comment below and let me know why not. And I'll leave it on strict, and I'll hit yes for the Git repository. And it also, all this Astro has this astronaut theme. So you can see here, it's like, good luck out there, astronaut. So I'm going to change directory to my Astro app view, and I'm going to go ahead and open it up in the same window here in VS Code. Great. So you can see my app is now open, and let's take a look at what it offers. So on the right-hand side, it's going to seem very familiar to you if you have used Vue or Nuxt in this source folder, or Next. In that case, you have these components. This is where you'll put your kind of standalone components that you'll add into your app. It has this layouts folder. So this is the layouts of where you're going to put everything inside your app. And this is where you can kind of basically surround your whole application by a layout. And then pages acts as essentially your router. There's the default index Astro. If you have just a single page in your whole app, this is where you would put everything. And then you can create different files in here. So if you create, let's say, an Erik.view, let's do that. Let's do an Erik.astro since we are using Astro. And this will be a standalone route for you. And let me show you. If I just let's just copy this stuff in here. I'll open up Erik Astro, and you can see here, I'm going to copy paste this here. I'm not going to change anything, but this basically essentially is a new route. So if I run npm run dev, and by the way, it's telling me I need to change my version. So I'm going to nvm use v18. I already had it installed. Npm run dev. And then I see I have this port 4321. So I'll open that in the browser. Here it is. This is what it looks like right out of the box. But I've created this new route called Erik. And Erik looks exactly the same because I haven't changed anything, but it created this new route for us. Another thing good to know is that by default, Astro will render your whole application as a statically site generated app, so SSG app. And so if we can test that out. So if I run npm run build, it's going to statically generate all your assets. It's going to create this index, Astro, and it's Erik Astro. And if we look a little closer inside the dist folder that I just created, you can see since it's statically generated, each route will have its own folder. And inside that folder, we'll have the index.html. So that's really nice. Now you can change this option there. If you look at the Astro documentation here, and you go to documentation here, you can search for SSR, and it tells you how to enable SSR in your project. So you can put output server, and then you have to install an adapter. So Node.js being one of the popular ones, but there's a whole bunch of different adapters for Vercel and a whole bunch of others. But you'll have to install the adapter, and then you can run it in SSR mode. We're not going to do that in this application, but it's good to know that you can. So let's take a look. Let me go back in. I'm going to delete this Erik Astro for now because we really don't need it. And let's take a look at what it looks like out of the box. So I think if you look at this Astro file, it looks really similar to components that you might be creating through Vue, but there's some big differences. First, at the top, you see these 3 dashes, and this kind of tells us this is Frontmatter. Astro really came out of the way to create apps for documentation websites that uses Markdown. If you can see here in the documentation, recipes to connect to CMS is still really popular. Markdown and MDX is really popular, so you can create Markdown files or MDX files. And so really at the top of each file, it kind of looks like MDX. But what's really nice about this is really just server code here. So you can use this in a Markdown file like this and put titles and a whole bunch of other things. But in a normal Astro files, this is essentially what's run on the server. So you can put all sorts of things in here. In fact, let's say here, I'm going to clean this up real quickly. So inside this main here, I'm going to put in a hello world. And let's say I put a class, and I don't know, I'll put in hello. And first, if I go back to my site and I refresh it and I restart the server here, npm run dev, you can see here's my real basic hello world here. Let's say I wanted to grab this main and do something with it. So if I come back up here and I do const main h1 equals document dot, let's do query selector, and I'm trying to grab the hello class, I'm gonna get an error that document is not defined. So you have to know that this is run on the server, and you can even see it more plainly if I come back down here and let's say I create a variable called test, and I'll say hello hi, and I'll console log test. I'll console log this test here. If I look in here, you see hi down here in the console because it's being run on the server side, but it's not being run on the client side. So that's a good thing to remember. One thing big about Astro is that it only ships only the HTML that you need. If you build things statically, it's not going to send any extra JavaScript to the client side that it doesn't need. And it also just runs things that you want on the server side. And you can then, of course, share this test using JSX right inside here. I add it in here. Now I see this hi, so I've been able to grab it. Now you're probably thinking like, wow, this is like server components that you'd use in Next. So does that mean I can do some reactivity here? Really, no. So if let's say I wanted to add in a quintessential counter that you see everywhere else. Oh, just to finish that last point before I get into the counter example, where you want to do this, unlike Vue, where the top of the file is usually your script, and that's we're still running on the client side, this one you have to end up adding a script tag at the bottom to add in your client side JavaScript that you want in. And so this is, let's add in that counter. So let me copy and paste something real quickly. Okay, so I made a couple quick updates, added a new button that says press me, added in this counter. And so I'm just using basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript here. So I'm doing some query selectors for the counter. And then as long as the button exists, I'm adding an event listener, and then I'm incrementing count. And then I'm changing the text content here. And so if I do that, it works. So there really is an Astro, unlike Vue or React, where you're using something like, use state or ref or reactive. You just use basic HTML and JavaScript if you want to create a counter. So it's pretty straightforward in that aspect. Now, let's imagine you want to add in an endpoint. You can do that. Now, if you haven't changed it from SSG or statically generated sites to server-side rendered sites, when you build the application, it'll contact the endpoint and grab all the data for you if you're doing like a fetch inside here. So that's nice. If you're using SSR, then it will be re-rendered every time you run the data, or every time the component loads if you have it doing it that way. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to create a new file here. So I'm going to call it data.json.ts, and you just have to add this TypeScript. So let me copy and paste what this endpoint will look like. Here is the API route that I created. So I'm just returning a response, but we have params and requests. I can do all sorts of things. Of course, it's all typed. Now, if I make this change, it should automatically reload. And if I go to my new data.json endpoint, here it is. So it's returning back JSON. And as I mentioned before, this top of this file is all it is running on the server. So I can do something like this. I'm going to grab the data. I'm going to run this fetch. And one nice thing is we have top level await. So I don't have to worry about suspense or anything like that I might have to worry about if I was using a React or Vue app. I'm just going to go into the endpoint data.json, and then I can display it here. So if I wanted to add in res, now we know that we have this .name. We don't have types right here out of the box. I could type this fetch if I needed to, so that way I can get types out of here. But if I change it, save it, now you can see here's Erik. So it grabbed the data out of here. So this all works as I expected. Now, one thing you notice is that out of the box, there's a couple of components here. One's called card.astro. And then in this layouts, there's this layout.astro. And if you look at this looks really similar to Vue. So you can add slots in your Astro files. And so what this will do is anything between the opening and closing brackets, in this case, this layout, will be displayed where the slot is. You can also do name slots if you want to, which is handy. I don't believe you can do scope slots, but that should work fine too. So this really feels very similar to Vue, except of course you are using JSX. So if you want to do maps, if you want to do any kind of for loops, you would use maps, things like that. So one really nice thing, if you look at the Astro documentation, there is a whole way to add integrations. So you can add in Alpine, Lit, Preact, React, Solid. I believe someone even has an HTMLX. There's SSR adapters, like we mentioned earlier, like Node, Netlify, Cloudflare. So you can add in your favorite UI framework if you don't like this. So I would say if you have a very simple website, this is great to do. I would think when you get a little bit more interactive, you probably want to add in a UI framework. I mean, of course, you can do document.query selectors, and this is a very, very small bundle size, like I said, because it doesn't ship any additional JavaScript that you don't need. But let's see if we can add in Vue. So it has a really nice interface to do this. So to add in Vue, I'm going to add in Vue end. So we can do npx Astro, add, and then Vue. And you can do React or Svelte too, and it's going to ask you, is this what you want? I'll say yes. It'll add the Vue 3.2.3, and it even updates the defined config. So if you are using Vue for a long time, you may notice a similarity. Vue had something very similar in Vue 2, where it had Vue add, which you can add in different plugins. Astro has something similar, npx Astro. I don't think Vue 3 ever got back because that was part of Vue CLI. This is really nice. You can do it this way. And it even updates the config file. So I can say yes here. It's going to update the TS config file. And now I have Vue available. There's a little bit of a catch, but let's see if we can do it. So I have Vue available. If I go back to my site, nothing changed that I've done so far. But inside my components folder, let's create a new file. So we're going to call it myVueComp.vue. We'll use script setup lang equals TS, and then we'll have a template. So in the index Astro file, you don't have to put in template. And of course, this is a little different. This is run on the server, but in Vue, you have to obviously add the template here. And then this is where the style would go. And unless you add scoped here, it's not. Scope, it'll be global. So if I do template here, let's add in just a very simple hello world. Hello from Vue component. Let's add a counter to it. So this is the counter example you see everywhere. Ref 0, import ref from Vue. And then we'll add in a button, press me, and click, and then just do counter plus plus. And sometimes I get this little squiggly line error, and I just have to reload the window, and that usually fixes it. So I'll just reload the window. Cool, so it looks like it's working now. And I'll go back to my index.astro, and now I can import that in directly in. So I'm gonna import in my new component that I call my Vue component, my Vue comp, and I can use it directly inside here. So I'm gonna add my Vue comp, close it off, and if I come back here, hello from Vue component, awesome. And let's see here, I had this counter. Let's make sure I have it in here. So we'll just do an h3 counter. Now you'll have to get used to using JSX with one single curly bracket and going back to Vue's double curly brackets, but that's not too hard to remember. So we'll go back to counter here. Kind of handlebars. So this is the original one we did. Now this is hello from Vue component. Now if I press this, it's not working. And you're probably thinking, like, why isn't this working? This is weird. And what we have to do in this index here, this my Vue comp, we have to basically tell it that this is a JavaScript component that needs to be re-rendered. So you can add in a client option here, and you have a few different options. You have client idle, load, media only, visible. And usually what this will do is this will load it in client mode, and so that this JavaScript gets loaded. So if I do to client load here and I refresh, now it's working as expected. And if you look at the network tab, you can actually see it's loading the Vue component and everything. One thing you could do is you can do client is visible. It's called visible. And what this will do is it won't load the values until it's in the viewport. So it uses the intersection observer component to see when it's in the viewport. Okay, so I added a quick change to here. So you could see here I had this Vue component. I added this new class called Vue comp. And what that's adding is a bunch of vertical height that does nothing. So if you look at the app out of the box here, a very, very small size. It's not running, basically there's no JavaScript or anything. But if I scroll down, boom, it adds in the JavaScript code to run it for the component here. So it doesn't actually run or add this Vue component until it actually is in the viewport, which is awesome. That's part of intersection observer. So you can do all sorts of things like that. Astro in itself has what's called this island architecture. So you can have this Astro island architecture or component islands, which allows you to have only parts of your website to load JavaScript only if needed. So maybe your header, if it's not interactive, it doesn't load the JavaScript, but maybe if your footer is interactive, the JavaScript gets loaded. And so it does this by convention. And if you start using the different frameworks, you can add this different client load. So you can have certain parts or certain components load as soon as the page loads. You can have them only load once it's scrolled onto the page. But it makes it so really quick, makes it really fast. So you can have different parts of your app. So maybe you have whole routes that are just statically generated that don't have any JavaScript at all, but then maybe some other parts of your app has JavaScript loading. So it's a pretty powerful feature, and it makes a whole lot of sense. So you're probably thinking, wow, if I can add in a Vue component, can I add in slots into my Vue component? Could I have like Astro components in between like my Vue component? And you can. So let's say if I go back into my Vue comp file and I add in like a slot here. Now I can have value. I can basically have like React components inside my Vue component, but I could also have Astro components inside my Vue component. You could do all sorts of things inside there. Let's say also I can pass in different props as well if I wanted to. So let's first, I don't know if you are like me. I'm not a huge fan of how props are done today. I always turn this configuration on. So just an FYI, I did this a while back. So you can do this experimental mode. I just add in this script here, and then I can turn on props destructure. I like this feature a lot. Tell me if you guys do too. And I think it's going to be in the latest version of Vue 3, so you don't have to use an experimental. So what that does is I can do something like this. I can do const, let's do message here. I can put a default message like hello world from Vue. And then I can do define props, and then I can add in my TypeScript here. So in this case, I'll add in message, which I'll make it, doesn't have to be sent in. And then I'll just have an equal there, not colon. So now I have this hello world from Vue. And now this actually destructuring works. It's reactive too, which is really cool once you turn that on. And that way you don't have to use with defaults. I don't know, it's just a little nicer. So I can also do this message here. Let's say I change this. Let's do this. I'll put the message here. And then if I go back to my index.astro, if I look at it defaulted and I save it, and I'll get rid of this right here. We don't need this. Here's my hello world from Vue. I can change my props that I send into it. So I'm going to change this to, I'll do hi test. If I change it, you see it's changed to hi test as we expect it, which is really cool. You can also pass in values directly inside here. So if I have const test123, hello 123, I can pass it in here just as JSX. So I can do test123 here. So changed it, hello 123. And then, like I said, I could add slots in here too. So let's say this, closing this. This is from Astro slot. And now you can see here, this is from Astro slot. So you could see this can be pretty powerful, especially if you have, if you're really good at Vue or React and you wanted to have this template. So overall, I'm pretty impressed by Astro. I think if I were to create a new project, knowing that I know a lot about Vue, I think I still probably would go with Nuxt and use the Nuxt content module. So if you look at Nuxt content, it works now with Nuxt 3, and it gives you a lot of the kind of nice things that Astro gives you with this migrating to Astro and some of the Markdown and MDX features you can do with using Nuxt content. There's some really cool things you can do with it. I would say I would use Astro if I'm on a team that really loves multiple frameworks and they wanted to create like a static site or documentation site, because I think this will give you a lot of flexibility of creating a really cool doc site. I still think Nuxt is probably my go-to for Vue developers. I kind of like this idea though, like of creating a site and be like, oh, you know what, React might be a better solution here because of this really unique problem that I'm having. So I'm going to create an Astro site. I'm going to write everything in React. And then maybe I'm going to pull some stuff from Vue in certain places. So now I can use multiple different frameworks. I could see that happening, but I think for the most part, I probably stick with Nuxt for most projects, or maybe Next. But I really like this. I think this is a really cool way. If I was learning JavaScript for the first time, I'd definitely pick up Astro. I think Astro would be really nice because you can see here, I could just create my scripts. It'll get me familiar with using query selectors and document manipulation, adding event listeners. And I wouldn't have to worry about all those things like, how do I statically generate my site? It does that all for me. And then once I graduate from this, I could be like, okay, let's add in React or Vue. And I can just, npx Astro add React and then add a React component. So this is just the tip of the iceberg for Astro. There's so many other things it can do. I didn't even get into adding in like a middleware or testing or any of the MDX content stuff. So let me know if you have more questions. Leave a comment below. Thanks.